Thanks for joining us today for Nights at the Round Table. Tonight's session is on fighting fair in marriage. And I have a couple guests with me today that'll be joining me on this panel, on this session. If you two could introduce yourselves, or three introduce yourselves, and just take a couple minutes, maybe, how many kids you got, how long you been married, something cool, crazy about you. Anybody can go first.
Pastor Bobby Terry, pastor of St. Luke Pentecostal Church in Lamar, South Carolina. Married. Love it. Been in it for a while. Now I'm old at
it. That's all right. I appreciate that, Pastor Terry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adia Terry. I'm married to Rondell Terry, who's my best friend. We've known each other since I was 15 and he was 16. And we have 6 children and grandchildren. I'm in the Army, been in the Army for 22 years, and I'm excited to say I'm going to be retiring. Something probably most people don't know. I don't know. I love dancing, so a lot of people may not know that about me because I sing, but I absolutely love dancing too.
Thank you so much, Miss Adia, and thanks for joining us. Got one more guest there.
My name is Jermaine Terry, son of Bobby Brendan Terry. I will be 52 years old this year. Actually, next week. Hard to keep up with everything. I'm married to Sharon Terry, my wife. She's now actually driving the vehicle, so I try to make sure I'm quiet.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining, taking time out your busy schedule to get on this virtual session on fighting fair in marriage. Jermaine, too, if you can turn your volume up just a little bit.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
A little bit better. But yeah, again, thank you for joining us on this session. Because in this session today, we're going to be exploring the essential components of fighting fair in marriage, and the importance of respect, the importance of empathy, open communication, resolving conflicts. So I'm grateful on this evening, that you have joined us, and as we delve into these strategies for effective conflict resolution, as we highlight the significance of building strong communication skills and fostering respect in relationships. Marriage. It's one of those life's greatest challenges, as we all know, because we all have probably combined about 100 years of marriage experience combined in between the four of us, I know. But also one of its greatest joys. So although we got challenges, marriage can be challenging. There's also a lot of joy in being married that I've learned in my own personal experience. However, it's always an however. Navigating through conflicts and disagreements with your partner, with your significant other, with your spouse, whether married or in serious relationships, it can get kind of tricky at times. And so in this panel discussion, I really want to explore, what some of that looks like, some strategies, and some maybe be able to give our listeners some tips for fighting fair in marriage. And so I first want to look at the term conflict. What a term. So I want to ask you all, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think of the word conflict?
Resolution.
Resolution.
I
Pastor
think
Terry.
of
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, a disagreement, which for me is I call it an opportunity to work things out. So
It's kind of where I'm at.
Like that opportunity to work things out. And what was that you said, Adia?
Resolution.
Resolution is first thing popped in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Resolution and disagreement. Pastor Terry.
I like what Jermaine and Adia said. Putting it all together is, as you say, finding a solution. And when we look at that word, it looks like a dangerous word. It looks like a word of warning, actually, because when you have conflict, you look at it in another sense as a bout. In other words, it's that there's two people in every conflict. Never one person in conflict, because if there's only one person, there's no conflict. You can't have a conflict by yourself. And so, as you said, a resolution, and you try to find what can solve this. This needs to be solved. And then the other thing we look at is, where did this come from?
Right.
Because if you never go to the root, then you're never going to the source. You can't fix it.
Can't fix it. And so do we think that in a lot of marriages, because statistics show that a lot of marriages, end due to conflict. I mean, we look at the National Center for Family and Marriage research. It found that conflict is a natural part of marriage, like you were saying there. Just how you perceive it. And with the average married couple having about 2 to 3 significant disagreements per month. Would you all agree with that? That the average couple has about 2 to 3 disagreements a month, and it doesn't have to be a big blown up argument or anything, but disagreements.
I agree with that. I think that's accurate, valid.
I do too.
Okay. And do you see that as a healthy thing or negative thing?
I think it's very healthy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives the opportunity to actually express emotions, feelings, and give you a chance to come to like we said earlier, a resolution. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Compromise, that sort of thing.
Compromise.
I also think
I like that word.
I was gonna say I also think you get to find out more about your mate, your spouse, because maybe it's something that has never been discussed before, and now it's an opportunity to know how they feel about whatever the disagreement is. And I just think it is healthy because we're human, and we get to, I think you learn more about your spouse and they learn more about you, maybe a difference of perspective or even opinion on something that's seen from their point of view that you may not have ever considered or took, or maybe just thought about how that impacts the other person. So I think it's healthy.
Okay. So the major thing you said there, I think I heard was perspective. How do you all view perspective and the importance of perspective as it relates to marriage? And so let me look at this one research study. It says that a survey conducted by the American Psychological Association found that money, communication, parenting are among some of the top sources of conflict in marriage. How can our perspectives, as what you were saying, Adia, maybe how can that cause conflict, or how can that affect conflict?
Well, I'm reading this book called The Four Agreements, and it it talked about opinion. And I think sometimes in marriage, because we are human beings, that even though you love somebody with everything that you have, um, they have an opinion about something. They have experience about something that is theirs, and you may not have had and not even know it. So when I think about perspective, it's basically how that person sees it from where they are. and you look at their experiences that are tied to it, how they see themselves. But I also think is that they have an opinion, and they have, we say, I use this term, like they have a vote because they are there. And so when you look at our perspective and what helps, or some of the factors when you look at how we have a perspective, it really boils down to who we are, what we know or don't know about ourselves, things that we may be unaware of, biases that we have that we don't know. And then you also have your opinion, your point of view, and all of those matter. But I think it's in the delivery, but also being able to receive from that other person and just coming together.
Anybody
It's
have any
also,
thoughts? Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
it gives you a learn, like as you said, it gives you a learning, because no matter how long you've been married, you still have to look at it the same way. No matter how old we get, we still have to look at it the same way. That first respect that we had in the beginning, it has to follow us through the marriage. And what's important to one should be important to the other. As I think Adil was saying, you know, opinions, you have to look at opinions as being mine is just as important as yours, and then you have to look at it. Sometimes you have to look at things and see what is important to you, what is important to me, because you're never going to know everything about one person. Never going to know. I don't care how long you live. I'll be 73 in a couple of months, and I don't know everything about your mom. And there are some things I don't want to know. I don't want to know everything about people. I just don't want to know. Some things you like to not know and just assume that's the way it is anyway. When it comes to being positive.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if it's a negative thing, sometimes you don't want to know either. If you are building on your marriage and building on the relationship, and if this thing that I see is going to cause me to lose a brick, and I need that brick because it's very important to build this building. So what am I going to do? Am I going to take the risk of later on, because I didn't take the brick because it didn't seem like, it was important enough, it was a negative part. So we have to look at it as being, we take the negative and the positive, and we look at it and we say, which one of these can help me? Which one of these can hurt me? So we take the way out and see what's important to us. Is this important enough to lose my relationship with you? Is this important enough to go to bed angry? And then most of the time you look at it and say, why? It's always a why, and then sometimes our patience, we don't allow our patience to be extended. And a lot of times in marriage, the things that we go through, it gives us more patience. And if we don't want to go through it, we're not going to have the patience. Patience brings experience. Then the experience is what brings the hope. That's what makes us happy. The experience that we went through, and we learned. Not only did we learn, somebody else learned from us, because someone is always looking at us as being married couples. And when we're outside, they look at us, oh, they get along so good. And sometimes we be saying to ourselves, if they only knew, So, and it's just learning and being happy to learn about you when you learn about me, and you look at me and say, I didn't know that. Well, I never told you because I didn't think you would accept it. So it's accepting one another. It's accepting things that you told me, even if it come to be negative. When we live together and live in love, even the negative things about each other, we can sit down and laugh about it.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you saying is that there's an appreciation in the balance and having a balance and really um, looking at that conflict, and again saying, okay, hey, is that conflict, is it worth my marriage? Is it worth staying in this particular state of mind? Is it not worth me saying, hey, how does this person view this thing? Why are they feeling that way? And so with conflict, I have this question. Do you think that conflict can be managed in a healthy way in marriage? Or I ask it this way: how do you think the management of conflict greatly impacts the relationships and the outcomes of our marriages?
One thing, you're going to be doing it together. And when you're doing it together, you're stronger, because two is stronger than one. And we're working on it together, and we're managing it. And that's where our focus is. Our focus. And then a lot of times our focus not why, is let's just work it. Let's just get it done. Let's just get it over.
So we talked about some really good, nice, mushy things, how we get through conflict, and how we resolve conflict. I heard some very positive words, but there's not always positivity. And sometimes we argue. Sometimes we say things that we don't mean, or say things that we mean and shouldn't say, or say things out of anger, out of frustration, out of disappointment in our marriages. And so I want you just to think about, as you have or reflect on maybe an argument that you had with your spouse or in a relationship. And I want you to think about, what are some of the unhealthy ways that you may have responded to conflict.
I'm going to give two answers. One, and this is just me being very transparent, is stuffing. And I learned this term. It's where it's kind of like a pressure cooker, and you just keep stuffing everything down, because I don't want to say anything that's mean or hurtful. So I just stuff all of my emotions, and screaming. So stuffing and screaming.
And to add to that, the announcement, we're announcing it again. We continue to go back to it. Retrieving. Especially when we've done laughed about it, and we've done prayed about it. And then the same thing comes back up. It means that lesson in the beginning didn't stick.
Jermaine, do you have any comments on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was having some issues trying to get my mute turned off. But yeah, I totally agree with all of the comments. And like Dad was saying earlier, you have to take it's like a positive, negative, just like the battery. You can't operate, you can't move, nothing happens without that negative or positive. So you have to have both of those in a marriage. You're going to have negative. If everything is never going to be perfect, like I know my wife and I, nothing is perfect with us, but we have learned to live with each other and learn to compromise. And yeah, like Sharon said, we are imperfectly perfect for each other. And that's kind of the way that we look at it. And we never go to bed, upset and mad and stuff like that. We don't try to bring up past things because that also brings back up, a conflict, a negative conflict that we don't want in our marriage.
That's good.
Yeah. And would you say that sometimes that we overlook some things when we are having conflicts, that we may overlook some of the things that, how that person's feeling, or overlook how we're feeling? or not pay attention in marriage. Pay attention to the buttons we're pushing, things of that nature.
Yeah, this is a lot of times when women dwell on the negativity, all the little things is what you dwell on. You don't look at the picture, everything that's positive. You don't look at everything that someone has done for you or will do for you. Focus on what they are not having. That's usually a very small amount. If you take time to think about it, think about all the good things that this person is or has done for you, then that's whole. Don't always look at their negative.
Makes a lot of sense. I've seen that and I've experienced it, and can say I'm guilty of it. And but I know that me and my wife now we try to grow and have grown and to try not to do those type of things. So looking at this verse, Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Anyone would like to comment on that scripture, Ephesians 4:29? Or give a little bit more depth because we're kind of already commenting on it.
Mhm.
And I'll go further. Go ahead.
That verse is saying that unwholesome, foul, abusive language, and say, let everything you say be good and helpful. And all of us know what's good, and all of us know what's helpful. So if we strive to do that, and I was jotting some notes down that if we use those certain terms and unhelpful remarks, if we would take some time and write down what we said, write down how we said it, then sometime write down when we said it, and then we both come back to this. Since we're growing through this, and we're trying to balance everything out. So you take, as I said, it's take the negative and the positive. So you take those things and look at it. And the only way to grow is to go back to where you was growing from and see how far you've gone from there. And if you write it down, it's something that you didn't forget. You don't forget it. Because when you work on it, then you find out, how can I let this strengthen me? So we take that negative and go to the word with it. And then we see what the Lord is saying. Then we pray about it. Because it's hard to pray about something that we really, really haven't discussed it. We haven't agreed upon it. And we're still holding a little heat with it. So if we take it to God, and we got to take it to God together, take it to God transparently, and wait on the Lord. And then we got to leave it there. If we ever take it and put it in his hands, we got to leave it. Can't get angry next week. You can't get upset next week and grab that same thing, because it's in the Lord's hands.
Yeah.
If you ever put it in his hands, then you actually are free of it. If you really put it there, then you're free of it, because you're never going to be able to dance, shout, be happy with each other, be lovable like you should, except the thing is out of your hands. Now, you can't put it in your mate's hands. You got to put it in the Lord's hands. You know, some things we put back on each other, but we have to take it off each other. We have to agree, this is what we're going to do. And then we're going to give it to God. And he always work it out. Always.
I'd just like to add it, the first part of that verse, it tells us what not to do. And it uses a very descriptive word that Dad alluded to. What unwholesome is something that is not good, it's not healthy, whether it's physically or spiritually. I like how it talks about, but the second part says only, but only do things that are building others up according to their needs. So it's really teaching us how to serve other people and not look at things. So if I say something that is unwholesome to another person or to my husband, basically I'm doing the complete opposite of what the second part of that verse is saying. It says, because basically we should be saying wholesome things that are going to build other people up. So anything that is unwholesome is tearing that person down, and you're not able to meet their needs that they have. And so this verse is really about the other person. And so if I'm looking and thinking about the other person, then, and I say that I love them, then everything, as much as you can, that you say, and because this is only talking about our words, should be to build them up because they have a need. So if I say something that is unwholesome, that means that I'm tearing them down. And on top of that, I'm not helping them with the need that they have, because the need may be, maybe they just needed to vent, and they want to tell you how their day went. And if you feel like you're being interrupted, you'll be short with the person. That's tearing them down. Or you may say like, well, I don't want to talk about that. So it talks about how important it is to build the other person up with our words according to their needs, not my needs. And I think it's really important to see that aspect of this verse. It says, because that it may benefit those who listen. So if I'm looking at my husband, then I want to say things that are to build him up. And like Dad said, I'm adding another brick because there's a need there. And you don't know who's watching, you don't know who's listening, you don't know who's paying attention. But when we do that, um, I think it definitely brings glory to God, but it also honors that person to say that I'm here for you and I want to meet a need. And even though we're not seeing things eye to eye and we're not on the same page and we're disagreeing, I'm going to first think before I speak, even in a disagreement, because there's a need that needs to be met, or we wouldn't be in this disagreement in the first place.
Amen.
It's great.
That is good. Go ahead, Jermaine
I think that was done.
or Sharon.
I think Dad was going to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something, Pastor Terry?
I was just I was agreeing with the Dia, and then I jotted something down. Just came to me real clear. If we always act like someone's watching us at home, it's easy to practice. It's easy to do the real thing outside because we're practicing inside. And if we always practice on the inside, because we never want anybody to see, the bad side. So it will be a lot easier, because then you find out you both are working together. Marriage is a job anyway. It's not part-time either. It's a full-time job and over hours.
So you all made some really good points. One, I heard take it to God. And so I like that point, because when you give it to God, you're releasing that thing. So now it's no longer part of the relationship, and you and the person can be relational. And now you're on the same side. And so now you're beginning to fight together against the problem. Because the enemy he loves disunity, especially in marriage, especially in a godly marriage. And so that's I thought that was a very important point. And then I know Adia talked about building another person up. It's not always easy to build the other person up, but one thing I've learned is that when we humble ourselves under God's authority, when we come together, and I know Adia and I talked about this before, we come together and we pray, about that thing. It's like a timeout, a pause, and because we're realizing that there's something else here that's fighting against us anyway.
Mhm.
And so we're beginning to realize that we're in this battlefield. So it's like, okay, we're out here in battle against each other. And so I think the question I want to ask is, do you think your marriage is a battlefield? And anyone can answer that.
Somebody might get that.
I don't know for sure if I would say it's a battlefield. I don't know because I don't feel like I'm truly fighting. But I am always, well, I guess I could say that. I could say I'm fighting to maintain what we currently have, right? The love, the respect, and those type of things. So I can look at it from that regard. Um, but yeah, I agree with that. I think that it could be a battlefield.
I like that.
And especially if it's something that you want and love and cherish, you're going to have to fight for it. And that's showing unselfishness, because we're doing this together. And it's showing the other person that you are so valuable that I'm going to stay in this fight.
I like that perspective, Dad.
Yeah, I like that too. Adia, you have anything on
Yeah,
that
I want to girl.
or Sharon?
He's on the phone. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Um, I guess because, I'm in the army and I think about, when you look at a battlefield, um, man, it's kind of hard to answer it, but I'm gonna say, how do I want to put this? When I think about a battlefield, like in the literal sense, um, you have two sides. The you have the opposing side, the enemy, and you have the people that are like, I'm in battle with you. You have the good people and the bad people. Um, and so when you think about a battlefield, you think about who's who's there, all of the players. And when you look at a marriage, it's two people, but there are other key players that are that are on the battlefield too. It could be, people on your job, right? Because they are saying things, it could be people in your family, it could be your children. I mean, there's so many different factors, right? And so when I think um about marriage being a battlefield, I would say that it isn't, um only because the husband and wife, one of them are going to have to choose what side they're on. And either you're on the you're you're either on the defense or the offense. And I guess it's kind of, to me, it's kind of weird because I don't want to look at my husband as like he's on the other end, or he looks at me as she's on the opposing side and I gotta win. Because in a battle, it's somebody's gonna win and somebody's gonna lose. And if we're both together, I don't I don't want either one of us to lose. I want us to both win. So I guess that's how I'm looking at it. Just, I don't know if I answered that right, but yeah.
I mean, it's your view, your perspective. So I heard fighting to maintain, and then what side are we on? And the word of God tells us that we should put on the full and whole armor of God. Which tells me there that we're in a battle constantly. But like you were saying, we do want to be on the same side. And I think in conflict, sometimes that may be difficult. Um, when we lash out or when we say things that we shouldn't say, or when we have that time period, that process when we're trying to process things and but I'm hopeful that, through, open discussions like this, through teachings like this, and through the Word of God, I know that I found that it feels that way. It can feel that way, but then you have to understand, okay, who do you fight? Who are you fighting with?
That's the thing.
Who are you fighting against? And I think, we went to this family life conference, and at the end of the conference, I remember it felt like my wife and I had almost like gotten married over again. It's like our marriage got restored, because it brought it back together vertically. And it's like we gave our marriage to God, versus just giving ourselves to each other. We gave that marriage to God. And so I just thought that was powerful, but I liked all your points. Did anyone have anything else to add?
Well, the scripture says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And when we realize that I'm not wrestling with my husband nor my wife, there's another opponent here. So we have to look at the opponent is the devil that's coming between us. We really don't have a war between each other. It's the outer where the war is, because sometimes you not, because in a war somebody wins and somebody loses. So when you look at the battle, that we in battle, we both want to win, and so then we have to be on the same side. Actually,
Hey, Dad, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mhm.
I was about to say, I've always thought everybody loses with war. Depending on how you look at it, right? It's one's perspective, but I think with war, every individual actually loses. Physical war, yes, everybody loses.
Something.
But that's just my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Go a little deeper, Jermaine.
So basically, for example,
I like that.
We send our troops over to fight for our country, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might win that war as a country, but
Right.
still, you got a mother at home that has lost a child.
Yeah.
So there's really no winning there for that individual, right? Yeah, we can look at it from a larger view, but when it comes to looking at it in that regard, you got 18-year-old kids that go to war, and some of them never make it home. Yeah, they fought for their country, and that country, we might have won that war, but at the end of the day, I think we still end up losing it because there's so much cost, there's so many things added. When you look at war negatively, right? Because it may affect the economy, different things happen, and I don't really think anybody wins when it comes to war. That's just my perspective. I might
I
be
want.
wrong.
Oh, I like what you said, Jermaine. That everybody loses, and that's why it was kind of hard for me to be like, man, I don't know if I want my marriage to be considered a battlefield, because the the harshness of war. And no matter, the word that came to my mind as you were talking, Jermaine, was the rules of engagement. Because
Right.
when you think about a battlefield, there are rules of engagement, even when there's going to be casualties, whether it's death, whether you're wounded, whether you're missing in action. There's rules of engagement because they're supposed to be humane. But even in being humane, people's lives are lost. People come back and they're never the same again. And so
Right.
when I look at marriage in a battlefield, um, and look at it from a natural or spiritual place, there's times that people can be lost and they never return, and they come back and they're never the same. Um, but I also like what Dad said, is that we're on the same side, but then you have the enemy. And that's
Right.
really, if we're going to look at it from a battlefield position, both the husband and wife have to say, we are always on the same side,
I
no
like that.
matter what. And
Right.
the enemy is who we're fighting against. So if
Mhm.
we're at each other's throats, the enemy really don't have to do anything. He just sit back and be like, Look
Right.
at them. They forgot the rules of engagement. They
That's it.
supposed to be fighting me and they fighting
Right.
each other.
Right.
And you
I love
know,
it.
and
I
you
love it.
just
Can
so
I oh
oh yes, I'm
can I
sorry.
interject one moment? Um so we got the fighting on the same side. We got the hey, we shouldn't look at this as a battle. We got everybody loses. I want to go to the scripture, James 4:1. It
Okay.
says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you?
Mhm.
Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? What are your thoughts on that verse?
That's good here. Going back to what I said earlier, it's valuing each other, valuing your marriage. And it's saying that whatever it takes, I'm going to fight through this. And no matter how much time, because sometimes, you know, you lose time. Like you say, you lose time in battle. You lose a lot of things in battle. But I'm going to take as much time as I possibly can. And some things I may lose. I to hold my marriage, I might lose a job. I might lose a friend. I may lose money. I may lose anything. Because, you know, as you said, there is a loss somewhere. But if we both are fighting, and if we see that it's not us fighting each other, because we don't fight flesh and blood, but it's a spirit that we're fighting. And when we realize that it's not you, this is not you. Let's see who this is. Let's see what started this. So we have to dig and find the root. And once we find out, it's not my spouse. So it's got to be the opponent. The opponent is the enemy anyway. So, like you say, let's lock arms, because where the two or three touching as agreeing on the same thing, then that's when we're able to give it to God. Because then he's pissed. But if we don't, and we've separated ourselves in the battle, then we're not giving it to God, and we don't have God's help. We don't have his help, and we're agreeing.
Amen. Philippians 2, 3, and 4. I want to go to that verse because it's just like a perfect segue to that verse. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. And so here, I would like to hear your thoughts on some ways that we can actively do this in our marriages when in conflict. Let me add that in there.
When in conflict.
Yes. Philippians 2, 3, and 4. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. And so I would just like to maybe if one of you all would give me an example, or, you know, or an experience that you had where you had to value your spouse over yourself.
Well, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I always look to have empathy, right? So before I do, I try to put myself in her shoes and see how she's looking at it from her perspective, which helps me to be able to, you know, do or say the right things and look at it from a different perspective. Because it's not just all about how I look at things. I have to consider her as well. So it's just me just having the empathy to look at things from the opposite side. And so maybe that's not the right answer, but that's how I feel about
No,
it.
that's just perfect. That's just perfect. Having empathy, you know, like Jermaine was saying, understanding being empathetic, empathizing with their feelings, with their emotions, putting yourself in their shoes. It's not always easy when we're not fighting fair, when we're throwing shade on the situation, when we're trying to win a battle, where we have placed our partners, placed our wives, placed our husbands on the opposite side of the fence. It's kind of difficult to be empathetic while you're shooting on while you're shooting at your partner with whatever you can come up with. Maybe you're shooting from the past. You know, maybe you're shooting from another experience. Maybe you're carrying weight from a past relationship. And you know, maybe you're shooting from fear. Maybe you're shooting from a lack of faith. Maybe you're shooting from doubt. Maybe we're shooting because of finances. But to be empathetic, is there another one? Miss Adia or Pastor Terry? I like that, man.
I was gonna say when it comes times when we just say our jobs or church. Sometimes we can take an appointment without realizing or discussing what the other one has in mind to do. And we take it anyway. Sometimes we do it because it's church. We feel like the spouse is going to understand anyway because it's church. So what could be wrong with church? What could be wrong with taking an appointment for church and not, do I have to ask you about going to church? Or do I have to discuss with you about going to church? Well, you don't know what I already had in mind. And so now you've taken engagement and then you tell me about it. And so when I say, no, I don't think so because I already had something planned. Now, you didn't tell me that you had something planned. So then we got two people that's selfish because we didn't talk first. You know, we said, this is what we want to do, but let me see what he feel like doing. Let me see if it's all right tonight. Maybe she thought about, let's just relaxing at home, you know. But now we've taken up an appointment, so we can't relax. You know, we're all busy all the time. Husbands and wives are busy. If they're in church, if they're working, if they're doing anything, you know, you can get busy and all caught up. And then you can say, I forgot to ask. I forgot to call home and tell you this is what I was going to do. You know, so sometimes we have to just, and what we're saying, we're valuing, we're putting value in the relationship. We're putting value in the communication. We're putting value in the other person's needs. You know, because then you can't come back and say, I mean, you can say it, but then it causes friction when you say, I didn't see nothing wrong with that. Well, we don't see nothing wrong because it's I. It's not we. You know, so when we look at it, then we can see something wrong. But if I look at it, I'm not going to see anything wrong because that's what I want to do.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So empathy was number one, and then the next one was communication.
Communication.
So we got having an understanding of what that other person going through. And with that, well, you can't have the understanding. It's kind of hard to have the understanding without the communication. And so I think those are two really good points. And I think in conflict, you know, being able to have open and honest communication, I think that's very essential in resolving conflicts. Being empathetic, that's essential. Maybe actively listening. I know we mentioned that earlier, where you know we were talking about how both partners need to actively listen and to, that way you understand the other person's perspective. What do you all think about compromising?
Well, if I could, I wanted
Yes,
to
go
just
ahead.
add on to what Jermaine and Dad said. So communication is using our words, right? It's speech, but empathy is actually seeing is seeing or putting yourself in that other person in their shoes. And when I think about the verse that you gave, um, I like both empathy and communication. But what I was thinking about was our words also follow through with action. So before I get up off of this from this chair, I think about that I'm going to get off of the chair. Um, Before I say something, I first must think, unless I, and it's sort of just understanding like how our brain works. So nothing just blurts out. You begin to think about it before you speak. And so if we would put our words through a filter or through a filter, you will understand that, hey, you're probably getting ready to say something that is hurtful, that is going to tear that person down. But not only that, but now it's going to cause an action to where that person may walk away. That person may go to another room, or they may turn their back to you. And so it's looking at our what we say, but also the actions that follow it. And when you add empathy, it's saying, I'm not gonna, even though this is an issue and I may even be the person presenting it, let me put myself in the other person's shoes to see if I would want somebody to say this to me, what I'm getting ready to say, if I would want that, if I would be okay with that person saying what I'm getting ready to say to them. Because now you can put your words through a filter to say, yeah, that's, oh, man, that don't sound right. And then the other part is when you look at empathy, communication, and our actions, the other part that you have to consider is that your problem? Or is it the other person, truly the other person? And I say that because I found myself disagreeing, right? And it's like, but that's something that I'm still working through. Like, that's my insecurity. And you can put that off on the other person and make it feel like it's them, but it's really you. And I'll give an example. We were looking at renting a car. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't read the email all the way. And I got there past the time that they were closed. And I'm just sitting up here like, I can't be mad at anybody but myself. But what happens because I haven't dealt with what I did that was wrong, I could take it out on my husband or take it out on our daughter. And so something that was a me problem can become a them problem because I didn't deal with what was going on with me. And so now you keep adding on, and adding on. And so I think we got to realize, and that's one of the things that I'm learning, whether it's in with my husband, with our children, with people that I work with, people at at my church, that the church we go to, um, is is this a dia or is this really the other person? And if I can narrow it down to that it's me, then I'm more likely to be quiet and not say what I really think I want to say because it's really not the other person. It really is me. And I have things that I need to work through and be honest with myself and not make it seem like it's the other person. And that's something that I have learned, and it has been so beneficial to me, especially being a follower of Christ, that I can go to God with about me in prayer instead of going to God about the other person in prayer, because really it's a me problem. And it has really been eye-opening when God shows you you. I can say
Amen.
that with full transparency. So I'm sorry that it was lengthy,
No, it's
but
it's
yeah.
it's perfectly fine, and truly, I really appreciate that transparency. And but I want to ask this question. Uh, since you all said that, we should be doing these things, and I know people are like, man, that sounds great, but how do we do this? Like, how do we prepare? Because sometimes I don't think we prepare well um, for conflict because we all have some kind of conflict. Like you were saying, Adia, and like you were saying, Pastor Terry, is that we're gonna have the conflict is gonna come, but it's how we handle it. It's our perspective, it's our perception, is how are we seeing this thing? Is are we being understanding with what other people are going through? And so I think there may be, it sounds like there needs to be some ground rules. what kind of ground rules, do you believe that are essential for maintaining, a positive and more constructive dynamic in your marriages during arguments? What kind of ground rules do you think, that our listeners could maybe set, just as a precursor, like, hey, we know there's going to be conflict at some point. Maybe we should set some ground rules.
I'll go. Someone told me this a couple of years ago, and they said, ask yourself, Adia, is it going to matter in 5 minutes? Is it going to matter in 5 hours? Is it going to matter in 5 weeks, 5 months, or 5 years? And whatever answer you get to, then you need to let it go. If what you're getting ready to say or do is going to matter so far out 5 years from now, okay, then you probably need to say it, because now we're talking about impact. But if it's not going to matter in 5 minutes or 5 hours, then you need to let that go. And it has caused me to to let it go, honestly. And I was sharing that with Rondell on yesterday, that I've just had to, not that it's not important, but I'm learning ways of being fair and equitable to my husband by saying, unless this is gonna, it really has an impact, then Adia, you're gonna have to let it go. And that's me, for me, is really is self-control, but it's also trusting in God that this thing is going, that it's going to be okay, and it's not going to have it's not going to, like, it's not going to have that a huge impact the way I may be thinking about it in my head as and before I say it. And the other one I would probably say is prayer, prayer, prayer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think those are good. I think those go together very well.
Mm.
Letting it go and prayer. In prayer was when we can have that time with God and communicate, get those things out, get those things off of us, and especially taking it to God in our marriage together. I think that's important to come to God together in prayer, so we can let those things go, give those things to God, and we can begin to fight the problem, not the people, not the person. Pastor Terry, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about whenever we are working on our situations, little things. And that's why I said, sometimes you have to write it down. And you set a rule that since you are working on this and you're working on this, and we're going to have a rule, let's never bring this up, until, if we ever bring it up, it means that I've come to a place of completeness in it. You've come to a place of completeness with it. And that's the only way we can discuss it anymore. But if we are still out there with it, and right now we can't discuss it because we haven't worked on it like we should, because my stuff helped me work on it. Your stuff, I help you work on it. And then we'll conclude together with checking off things. Oh my, this is, and then once we check it off and we've said that we're not going to mention this anymore, because we have grown out of this. Because there are some things that God have grown us out of, that sometimes we pull back in. God brought a deliverance through and then the things that we go through, there's an experience. What did I learn? Now, if I pick this up, I'm only looking at it because I've learned something from there. I gain my experience. I look at my experience hope make it not ashamed. The things that I hope for, and it becomes an evidence. My walk now becomes an evidence of the things that are behind me.
Hmm.
Even if I look at what's behind me, I'm only looking on the chartboard because I'm checking it off. I'm not reaching for it to use it again.
Ooh, that's
You know,
good.
because the war is over through that. So there's no need for me to go and pull out bombs. The war is over there. I've learned, you've learned. So check this off. We don't even talk about that no more.
Hmm.
We don't discuss it no more. It's gone. It's over. We done laughed about it. We done made up. You know, we done made up, laid up, made up, enjoyed each other. We done laid up, relaxed about it, and say, you know, that wasn't necessary anyway. Now, if it wasn't necessary, it can't come up no more because it wasn't necessary anyway. Because if you use it again, then you actually mean to use it.
It's a lot of sense. And so what I'm hearing is very big in bold letters. Let it go. Giving it to God in prayer together with your spouse. Then I'm hearing work together. In a Christian marriage, God expects us to unite, not just in our praise and our worship, but unite in our marriage. So that it's a marriage that glorifies Him. And so I thank you for both of those points. And as I look at Proverbs 19:11, it says, "Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is His glory to overlook an offense." And so I think that's a powerful scripture. You know, one thing, maybe not being overly sensitive, you know, about certain things when you know that person's heart. Remember, you can be just as annoying. You know, maybe it's some things about you that if you had to be the other person, you wouldn't like either. You know, maybe there's some things about you that are annoying. Maybe, you know, so maybe putting yourself in their shoes, paying attention to what pushes their buttons. You know, if you're seeing things that push your spouse buttons, don't do that. You know, that's not going to be healthy. And that goes both ways. But ultimately let it go. And then restore patiently. You know, I think sometimes that we have conflict, and some conflict maybe is never restored. Maybe one person is forgiving the other person, or the other person forgiving that other person, and you're not getting the reconciliation. I think that's important. I think because when there's reconciliation, there's hope. Um, you know, and I would say take it one step at a time. I think sometimes we try to handle everything, we try to fix everything, but all that stuff that not all the things that happen in conflict, a lot of times it happens because of maybe several different things. Maybe because you're stressed out, going through anxiety on your job. It could be things going on in ministry. You know, it could be things going on personally, interpersonally with the children. So I think sometimes we really got to step back, you know, from the marriage. But let's step back with our husbands and our wives. Let's step back together. I've known sometimes when I may still be agitated about something, but my wife already went to God in prayer. She already went and interceding for that thing, but I didn't notice what was going on. And so I found that I didn't know her in that way. Like sometimes she's quiet, she's just praying. You know, she's praying, interceding for the situation. I think it's good. That's really a good thing. And I'm so happy to have a wife that will go into intercession and go into prayer, that knows how to say time out. But I also want to add in our marriages, hey, pull your husband to the side with you. Wife, husband, pull your wife to the side with you. And let's do that praying and giving it to God and letting it go. Let's try to do that in unity, so God can begin to build us and make us stronger. And so I have maybe one, two more questions, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Proverbs 18:13, it says to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. What are your thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Adia.
I was actually looking to see if you were there's two things that come to mind: jump into conclusions and making assumptions. If you answer before listening, you're probably going to assume, and you're probably jumping to conclusion. Those are just the two things. That's what I get from Proverbs 18 and 13. Making an assumption.
Yeah, go ahead, dear. Finish.
Oh no, that was it.
And I think you only do that because you feel like what you're going to say is more important than what they are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being selfish.
Yeah.
Let me come off of mute here. But we wrapping it up, and I really just appreciate you two. We're about 5 minutes over. But I thought that was a great discussion. But just to kind of reflect on some of the things that we looked at, I want people to always walk away with some practical solutions. Number one, for effective conflict resolution, you're gonna have conflict in your marriages. You're gonna have conflict because you're in a battle, but we fighting for love. We fighting for our marriages. Because Satan would like nothing more to cause disunity in a godly marriage. And so, number one, communication. Continue to be open and honest with your spouses. That's very essential. If you're not communicating, a lot of times we're making assumptions, or it shows that we don't care. Actively listening. Both partners should actively listen to each other's perspectives. Let's try to do that without interruptions or becoming defensive. Number three, compromise. Finding that middle ground. Solutions that considers the needs and feelings of both partners. And that helps resolving conflict. Number four, empathy. Understanding, empathizing with your partner's feelings and perspectives. We talked about how that can help create a more collaborative and supportive environment, because now we're working on our problems and our conflicts together. Problem solving, working together to identify the root cause. What's at the root of this thing? Now we can see the emotions, we can see the behavior, we can hear the responses that we like or dislike. But what's at the root of the problem? So putting that problem aside, getting that problem outside of the relationship so that we can fight, attack, kill the problem, not the person. Not attacking the person, attack the problem. Setting boundaries. We talked about that earlier. Establishing healthy boundaries and guidelines for conflict resolutions. Setting those rules. Everybody in their marriage, every marriage is going to have its own customized set of rules. You can't just look at some book, even though there's really good books out there, like the one we're reading now. It's called Drawn Together. I'm not getting paid for this, but this is a really good book. It's Drawn Together. It's a couple's devotion. It's about family life, art of marriage. But I would say get it. And number 7, seeking help. We didn't talk much about that one. Seeking pastoral counseling, seeking, accountability partner. Maybe having a good accountability partner, maybe another couple that you trust, that you've maybe known for a while, that can maybe help kind of mitigate some of those things. Maybe it's some things that you're like, man, we don't understand each other. Things that don't seem right. Well, maybe it's your communication. You never know, but let's seek some guidance, seek some help. Even life and family marriage therapists. It's not just crazy people that go to therapy. We've been to therapy in our marriage actually before we got married. And I want to start back going to therapy, just to make sure we're getting those tools and we're putting these things into practice. And when we need to bounce some ideas off of somebody, we have our therapists. But that pretty much wraps up today. Pastor Bobby Terry, I thank you so much for coming on and just giving us, knowledge and wisdom, and really giving us that theological knowledge, but practical application. I thank you for that. And my beautiful wife, Adia Terry, thank you so much, for your knowledge and information and your transparency. And Jermaine was on here earlier, and I thank him for coming on and sharing with us. And just appreciate you all taking out of your schedules. But you know, just in conclusion, by learning how to communicate effectively and resolving conflicts in a healthy way, couples can strengthen their relationship and deepen their bond. And I truly believe this. And so after this is posted, you know, please feel free to share your thoughts, you know, engage in some of the challenge questions that we'll be posting as you reflect on the scriptures and enhance your skills in fostering healthy communication and respect within your relationships and within your marriages. I thank you all for joining us on today. And again, appreciate you all for coming on here to just join us in this session at the round table. And that's it.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.